These are the 7 things that I think will be relevant to everyone on the call. And they all come after the 8th thing, which is what we've been talking about up until now, and that is embracing a change management methodology. So, you know, that goes without saying almost, although I have been saying it now for some minutes. But, you know, adopting a strategy, a structured approach is really important because this effort requires discipline. It's easy to start implementing tactics and forget, you know, that you actually would be better off if you were working from a strategy. And that's the last thing you want to do, because everybody has ideas. Executives will come in and have ideas for tactics that in and of themselves aren't bad, but if they don't fit into your strategy, they can really dilute your energy and your resources. So we want to avoid that. So embrace a methodology, develop a strategy, and then consider these 7 ideas as part of that. Number 1, and if you've been reading the Microsoft recommendations on Teams adoption, this is not a new concept. They really believe in this idea of developing a cadre of champions to help you kind of infuse the organization with some enthusiastic users. And we think it's a great idea as well. There are as many ways to go about this as there are organizations out there, I'm sure. But identifying and recruiting some early adopters, getting them to talk to you, organizing them so that you know what they're running into. For example, Patrick's Patrick's comment about people being frustrated with using the tab key inside of Excel, a champions group that's got themselves, you know, if you have helped them by setting them up with a team in Teams, they can help each other solve problems like that and end up helping the whole organization. Our second recommendation is to assess your culture, to really look at where you stand in terms of collaboration. And this goes beyond the audience assessment tool that we looked at earlier. This is ideally, and the way we like to do it is to go out and do what you see here on the slide. We like to talk to people in small groups, groups of people that represent different areas of the company. You can invite your champions to participate in these groups, but it also, you know, you also want to be talking to people who are not early adopters, but you want to be finding out what their concerns are and what their reactions are to some of the ideas that that you have about teams, and see how they react to them. I think for any size organization, if you do a half a dozen of these, you will be well on your way. You may decide that you need to do a lot more than that, but I really think even in a huge organization, if you choose your kind of target audiences well, you don't need to talk to a ton of people to get a good handle on what folks are saying. But my advice about, so these are really focus groups, okay? And my advice about how to do them effectively, first of all, don't let your groups get too big. You know, never invite more than 20 people, and really hope for about 12 people to show up. That's an ideal size. And have a discussion guide and stick with it. And the reason I say that is that will give you input that you can aggregate. If you do 6 of these and let the discussion go wherever it will, and then come back and try to write a report for senior leaders to tell them why you need more resources or why you need less resources, whatever, it'll be very difficult to aggregate that input. But if you ask each group the same questions, then it will be much easier and much more valid to add all that together into a pretty clear picture about where things stand in your organization. Oh, one other thing I was going to say about the focus groups is if you work for a company that has a communications department, see if you can't enlist their support. They've probably got people, or your marketing department for that matter, probably has people with a lot of experience doing focus groups, and that can be really helpful. Okay, this next recommendation is use free stuff. So you didn't need us to tell you that, right? But what you might not have known is about this particular link. So this is a great site. Actually, I guess I'll just go there so that we can scroll down and see the whole page. It has adoption guides for some of the key Microsoft platforms. The Teams adoption guide is this flip book. You can download this, or obviously you can just look through it here on the browser. There's good stuff in here. Most of you maybe have seen it already, but I find that I try to go back to this once every month or 6 weeks just to remind myself of some of the good ideas and some of the good resources that are contained here. So one thing that we were kind of excited about, I don't know who ended up joining today, but I know we had a couple people from government agencies who were signed up. This is new. We now have a government flip book. So if you're working in a government organization, this is a new resource for you, and they have their own set of challenges working inside GCC tenants. So anyhow, by all means, take note of this this bookmark, and I'll go back to the PowerPoint. It's just resources.techcommunity.microsoft.com/adoption, and take a look at what's there. I think you'll find it very worthwhile. Okay, the next recommendation. So almost everybody introduces teams with pilot groups, and that's another in all of the Microsoft adoption material. You'll see that they recommend starting with pilot groups, and we've been using pilot implementations of technology forever, so we didn't really need it's not a new idea. But one thing that that we've discovered is really important is really make an effort to be diverse with those groups. If you only pilot with IT people, for example, you're definitely going to have a different experience than you are if you're piloting with more diverse groups. So you've probably already got some pilots underway. Your project team probably has a team. When you establish your champions, it's a pretty obvious idea to set them up with a team, but also, reach out into your organization and find some other less tech savvy, maybe groups of people to involve in pilots, because you'll learn a lot from them as well. Next, I get to debunk a common truism that I've heard so many times over the years. Everybody thinks that it's been a proven fact that people want to get information about change from their immediate supervisor. And the truth is that the people do want to hear from their immediate supervisor when it's about, what do you want me to do? How is this going to affect me directly? But people also need, especially when it's a big change like Teams, people need to know why. And the immediate supervisor is usually not the best person to answer that question. Usually the best person to answer that question is a decision maker in the organization. So keep that in mind. And this, of course, goes back to what we were saying earlier about the importance of executive involvement and executive sponsorship for the team's implementation. Use those senior folks to talk very plain English about why they think the organization needs to embrace teams. And once people hear it from that level, then you would be surprised how what a big impact that can have, and it can really help to reduce resistance. Number 6 is to deploy a relatively new Microsoft resource called Learning Pathways. And this is, if you haven't had a look at this yet, it's pretty exciting. I know that there's one big employer in Northeast Ohio who has a staff of 8 or 9 people that work on developing and curating training content for Office 365. I think that most of us are not going to be lucky enough to have those kind of resources at our disposal. And Learning Pathways is definitely the next best thing. It's training content for Microsoft 365 that is curated by Microsoft, but it lives in your tenant. You deploy it or provision it, you provision it in SharePoint, but Microsoft feeds the content so that it's kept up to date. And we've been working with this for a couple of months now. And we've seen a lot of improvement and a lot of tweaks and changes in that time. They're really, they're working on this to make it really great. So the way it works is you can deploy it just like this. So it's like a SharePoint site, and you can deploy the whole site. So what you're looking at here is the home page for the full site, but you can also deploy it in such a way that you don't, even if your intranet isn't on SharePoint, you can still link to, like, so there's a page of training for teams, for example, and you can link to that page from any website so that your people can find, you know, a dozen or so videos and other content on Teams training that is always going to be current. It's going to feature the new features, and all you had to really do was turn it on. So we think it's a brilliant solution to, you know, a deluge of information. And then our final recommendation is to establish a center of excellence for collaboration. And this is to think about like the reinforcement phase of your change, right? So you've got a project team, there's a lot of energy, you're getting a lot of support maybe from Microsoft or Microsoft partners, and you've got a core team and your champions are excited, but Teams is here to stay, and I think that's pretty clear from the way it's been engineered and the way it interfaces with all of the other Office 365 tools. But it needs somebody, in several somebodies, keeping an eye on developments in order to keep it up to date, to make sure that security is being reviewed, to make sure that the latest and greatest capabilities are being fully rolled out in your organization. And communications is only part of that. So we recommend that you not do it as an afterthought, but do it going in, knowing that the implementation team may have a beginning, middle, and end, but supporting collaboration is something that really should never end in your organization.